Who do you consider to be bands that are in the vein of Beck? I think we've talked about Beck, just that he's kind of an enigma. Like, there's not really anybody quite like Beck. But if you had to think of other bands that would be a good complement to him, who do you think they would be?
Who's like Beck?
Yeah, or just not even necessarily like him, but just a good compliment, like kind of a peanut butter to his jelly, so to speak.
I didn't know Cage the Elephant. They opened up for him a couple years ago. They were pretty cool.
I don't like that name.
No, I don't either.
It's like a very trying to sound indie type of name.
Yeah, I freaking hate it. And this guy was like, kind of looked like Mick Jagger, like a younger Mick Jagger, but he kept changing his uniforms every song, or like costumes every song, and
yeah,
I don't know. It was kind of interesting. But who would be good? I mean, there could be a lot of bands that play with Beck.
What? Like, I think that, like, for example, I think Ween would be kind of cool with Beck.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing with two bands like that is they're pretty much equals, so I don't know who would open for who.
Or yeah,
I guess. Yeah, but Ween's really big. They're like, they have really big shows.
Yeah. Yeah, so not even necessarily opening for, because you're right, that like has a dynamic to it. I mean more just if it was a show, like what lineup do you think would be appropriate with Beck that you would like to see?
Well, I thought the band that was playing with him was appropriate, and so now I have to look at who that is, because one sec.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Interpol, but to me, Interpol doesn't really complement Beck at all. They're like a totally different flavor.
Yeah, right. Interpol, they opened for Morrissey a couple years ago, and I really went to see Interpol.
That kind of makes sense, though. I can see Interpol with Morrissey more so than Interpol with Beck.
Oh, man, no. I gotta... Let me see. Maybe it isn't at this place, I think.
Let's see. Other bands that kind of go along with Beck. Maybe like Soul Coughing, maybe even, I don't know if they're still doing stuff, but Soul Coughing kind of has that hip hop jazzy sound.
Yeah, I was gonna say Soul Coughing, really.
Yeah.
He does smaller stuff, but he can't get. There's like I heard an interview with him, and he can't get some of the members, the original members, to be interested to rejoin it. So it's just like, and Phoenix is playing with Beck.
See, I know a lot of people really like Phoenix, but to me, they kind of remind me of the Strokes. Like, they kind of have, not that they sound like them, but they kind of have that generic commercial indie sound.
You don't like the Strokes?
No. I mean, I don't hate them, but I just think they do that song Last Night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just think that song is like so. It's just
that kind of, they overplayed it when it was popular, but I think the album's a pretty good album.
I mean, they're good musicians and stuff. It's just, it doesn't really have an interesting flavor to it to me. I know a lot of people like the Strokes. I think a lot of people think it's weird that I don't like them, but yeah, I don't like the Flaming Lips either. I don't like the Flaming Lips. Don't like Phoenix.
They have some good songs, but I'm not a huge. I don't know many of their songs. For some reason, I never really got into them as much.
Didn't you say that you went to a concert, though, and it was pretty cool? Like, they were doing some pretty cool... So you said something about a big beach ball or something?
Yeah, that
I mean,
was
not
in
that a
San
big beach ball is all that weird, but
and it was I think it was a New Year's show. It was the year that I was thinking about moving out there when
oh yeah,
when I was out there in 2014, I guess.
yeah,
Yeah, it was. I mean, they definitely put on an amazing live show because they do have a couple beach balls and a bunch of confetti and people dressed in like animal costumes, and
oh huh,
there was somebody dressed in like a rainbow. So it's pretty cool. I mean, and you know, I really like. I don't really like. I always say that episode on Portlandia where you know the Flaming Lips are like they're having troubles with, I don't know what the issue is, but they end up breaking up and there's two Flaming Lips bands, and like Wayne Coyne is in one and the guitarist is in the other, and it's like I guess the reason they got in an argument was because one of them didn't introduce the other one to not Johnny Depp, but the guy that Sean Penn.
mm-hmm.
So it's kind of funny, but they have a few good songs that I like, but they don't. I never got as super into them as like I was way more into Phoenix and the Strokes than them.
Yeah.
But like with Phoenix, I did kind of go through this phase where, like you said, I just kind of lost interest in them.
Mm-hmm.
But I've seen them live a few times, and I've seen Beck, and they're all pretty good live. This show is actually in Madison Square Garden, so that's like the biggest venue, you know.
Yeah.
And Beck in Phoenix, I don't know. I might go to that. I might try to go to that. Just because like last fall, I saw Seven Dust on September 15th, and that was amazing.
Oh, that's cool.
And I saw Van Morrison like a week before that. So
man, he must be getting up there now, huh?
Van Morrison, yeah. And I don't know. He played a lot of songs I didn't really know in the beginning, so it kind of bothered me. I actually left early, and then I think the opener was called Tom Jones. I just always get to concerts way too early. Like, I try to get there when you know, the main band is starting, but I always end up getting there like at least an hour before they start, and sometimes like 2 hours before.
Yeah.
And so by the time the main act gets on and that's actually playing, I'm just so tired. And that was the case with Markson. Yeah. And Tom, I think his name is Tom Jones. I mean, he's popular, but I never really liked his stuff.
Is that meant to be funny? Is that like his alias or whatever, Tom Jones? Because he used to have like a Tom Jones T-shirt.
Yeah, well, I think that was George Jones.
Oh.
It was like more country, but this, I think his name was Tom Jones, and he has a big hit. I can't remember what it was, but you know it if you hear it. He has a couple, I think. But I don't know. And it was like these people next to me were annoying, and then I was in the wrong section, so I was actually sitting in someone else's seat, and then they had to have me leave, and that was embarrassing. So then I don't know. It's just I don't know. I don't really like going to concerts because every time I get I don't know. I just don't like. I don't mind being around people, but there's always something weird happen, or somebody bothers me, and I'm just like, it's better to not go, and then I save the money, but I don't know. Sometimes I feel like it's almost like an obligation, like I should go.
Yeah. I have to really like a band. I mean, they have to be one of my top bands that are like part of who I am as a person to feel obligated to go. Like I felt like I had to at least go to one Primus concert, but really just the one concert that I went to, I was like, that was really cool, and I think that's enough.
Yeah, that's the only concert you've been to is Primus?
No, I went to a Tool concert. That actually was really cool too. But then I went to that big ass show back in Salt Lake City.
Yeah, we went to that together. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, that was when
Pretty.
it was funny because I liked Beck, but to be honest with you, one of the bands that I did actually want to see was Korn, and that was at the time, if you recall,
they were just getting huge right then.
Yeah, that was whatever the album the Are You Ready, that one, and it's just so funny that you ended up getting a lot more into them than I was, but at the time I was like, these guys have a really unique sound, but I didn't know at the time that I guess they weren't calling it at that time this label, but they were new metal, which basically means a fusion of like hip hop and metal.
Yeah.
And to me, that's just like the most nauseating type of genre there could be. I mean, think about who's in that genre. There's fucking Limp Bizkit, Linkin Park.
Yeah, both Limp Bizkit and Linkin Park are, I always say, they're like the Warrants of, new metal or rock rap. They killed it because people just got sick of those bands. It wasn't like, Korn ended up going on. Deftones, they lasted.
Well, and Rage Against the Machine, I guess, is the band that's really credited with kind of starting new metal. And to this day, I actually like Rage Against the Machine. They don't really sound anything like those other bands to me, because to me they had the credibility, the cred to kind of have that hip hop flavor, but the thing is new metal, as I think of it, is it's basically white boy metal rap, which is like not what I'm into.
Well, I think Rage was in that description. They weren't.
Well, Zach De La Rocha was, I think he's Mexican / Native American or something like that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Looked half white, but yeah. Yeah, they're really good. I think the Chili Peppers were probably there, and those bands always talk about Faith No More as being the first one.
Yeah, I don't really like Faith No More. Like that song.
Yeah, I tried to listen to them a little bit. I haven't really gotten into them. Another band.
What was their big song? Wasn't that you want it all, but you can't have it. Like just that melody to me was really annoying, and also that stupid "you say what is it?" Like that was just so annoying to me.
Yeah, no, I never really liked it either. It was like they were trying to be tough and stuff, but it just
and weird. They were trying to be quirky, and it just was off-putting to me.
Yeah, but they influenced a lot of bands that we like Metallica, Primus.
You like Metallica?
No, I don't like Metallica.
Oh, I thought you said that they influenced a lot of bands that we like.
That's true. I did say that. Metallica is one of those bands that I don't like. That song 1 was good.
I actually don't dislike Metallica. I mean, it's just that they don't really resonate with me exactly. But they do have some like really kind of moving chord progressions, like that song "Trust I Seek and I Find in You. Every day forces something new." Like I think that's kind of a nice song, but it's just kind of lame at the same time. It's very. I mean, it's just like the dirtiest, butt rock metal to me. They're like the pioneers of like just butt rock metal.
Yeah. Butthead rock.
What did I say?
Butt rock, but I just thought of Beavis and Butthead. I mean, one of them, Metallica shirt.
Oh, right.
But I also wore an AC/DC shirt, and I like AC/DC.
I like them too.
More than Metallica.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just have this one live album that I listen to that has all their hits on it, but that they're more my style, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just have it that I like more. And, that kind of metal that has a really good beat to it and really funky kind of, I don't know if funky is the right word, but just or even catchy is the right word, but it's just, like, simple, but very just strong, like,
very American too.
Yeah, like, even though they're Australians.
Oh, they are?
I didn't know that. ACDC, they're Aussies, yeah. Like, Back in Black, that's a really good one. What's the one that, Who Made Who? I freaking love that song. It's such a cool song.
Yeah.
They just have the coolest riffs.
They do. Thunderstruck, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, we were listening to that album. That was a weird time because I remember Mom was sick then, but I remember we went up to Bear Lake for a little trip or something, or I'd probably see Grandma and Grandpa too.
Yeah.
And we were listening to that album. And it's totally the wrong album for peacefulness and where we were.
I don't recall that. It seems like I would have remembered that. Are you sure I was there?
I think so. I think it was you, Mom, Gabe, and I in the Mitsubishi Galant.
Oh, really? Was that the one where we got mad, where we were like, Mom, nobody drives 65 miles per hour, and she was like, that's the speed limit. And
yeah.
Does that ring a bell?
That does ring a bell, yeah. I'm sure that conversation was had. But I look back on that and just think, I used to listen to all that type of music around Mom, and she never complained about it. She never said it was too loud or anything.
Well, she would say, she would be like, okay, guys, that's enough of that real heavy duty stuff. Remember, she would refer to it as heavy duty.
Yeah, it was heavy duty too. Yeah.
She did, but she actually, that's not, I know what you mean, but I do always remember her writing you that letter about Def Leppard of all bands, and she didn't feel good about that Rock of Ages song, and she wrote you a letter saying that in the Bible Jesus is referred to as the Rock of Ages. So I think that what she was getting at was that it was blasphemous in some way. And I remember at that time I was like, Mom wrote Josh a letter? And I think that's so strange. I mean,
really?
That doesn't ring a bell with you at all?
Kind of.
Yeah. Well, and it seemed like she wasn't all that fond of, that very first album that you owned, the Van Halen one with the baby angel smoking a cigarette.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of Christian parents weren't really that great with that image. I mean, they were trying to piss those people off,
Yeah.
Or make about things. I used to, as one of those album covers that you just think about for a long time because it's very strange.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Van Halen 1984, that was the first album I owned. Well, it was because the other one was Tears for Fears.
Yeah.
And that came out in 85.
Who got you those albums? Do you know?
I don't know. I I guess they were probably birthday or Christmas presents.
I mean, Mom wouldn't have gotten you that, so it must have been Dad.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I really don't remember buying them or anything.
Yeah.
But I definitely had that little drum set that they got me.
Yeah.
And so I tried to play along with that. But, you know, it was pretty good. But, of course, it didn't have a hi-hat. That's the thing. That's, in a drum set, even as a kid, you have to have a hi-hat or you can't play rock music if you don't have. It had that one like a regular, I don't know, crash cymbal they call.
Yeah.
But you hi-hat, you have to have. And that was a Mickey Mouse Kmart set. That was the most they could afford, and I think it was fun to try to like play along to Tears for Fears and Van Halen and figure out what they were doing. Looking out that window, that was a really cool room because it was a loft room, really, right? Because whenever the roof is slanted. And that's the ceiling. I guess that's a loft.
Was it slanted?
Yeah.
I don't recall that. I remember looking up at the texture of the ceiling and, I always remember thinking that textured ceilings are a little bit like clouds in that if you stare at them for a while, you can start to see, I don't know, dragons and pirate ships and stuff like that, or weird faces. But I do remember that there was that... light cover that was like a map. I don't know if it was a world map or like a map of America, but I think it was a world map. Mm-hmm. But
I remember that.
Yeah, but it's funny how when you're a kid you assign significance to that sort of thing. Like you just think that, oh well, I guess that lights have maps on them or something like that. Or like, how you had the bed that had a blue frame and mine had a red frame? Like, I always thought that there was some method to that, or like some that there was some correlation. Like, oh, well, of course Josh has the blue one and I have the red one, like...
Yeah,
I think that everything is like part of you in a weird way. Like it's part of your own personal experience. Like even that Van Halen tape, that first song, Jump, like, I always thought to myself, like, oh, this totally means jump out of bed. It's time, might as well jump. And so I just thought, well, that's probably what they're talking about, in a way, because I like to jump out of bed while listening to that song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know. Yeah. I guess a lot of rock songs are open for interpretation, but yeah, that was growing up on that type of music, I always think we had pretty good taste, like, early on. But, it's mainly because of our parents.
Yeah. Well, and in a small town, like, country was not a part of our musical upbringing whatsoever. Like, there was no...
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad to.
Yeah.
Well, I think... No, yeah, I am. I think it's good to listen to rock when you're a kid. Well, at least I guess I say that because that's what we did. But I mean, there's some good country. I'll listen to like Hank Williams sometimes.
Or I like Hank Williams.
Johnny Cash. Those two.
I wonder if they were setting out to like write country music, because to me, with those guys, they really almost kind of were cowboys, so to me, like, real cowboys don't really write country music. Like, they just are country music, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I always had a problem with the thought of, like, actual cowboys that ride in rodeos writing country songs. I just don't think there's much overlap there.
Yeah.
I think, but that's a good question. Has there ever been like a PBR bull rider who also is a country western star? I don't think so.
Well, yeah, because to me, country music is like the show version. It's the performance of this thing that we think of as being this romantic cowboy lifestyle. Like it's almost like they're almost like actors. You know what I mean? The country musicians are like actors, and they're at that point removed from the actual life of a cowboy. But at this point, I don't think there's any more legit cowboys out there. Do you? I mean, when I'm talking about a cowboy, I mean somebody that is actually like riding a horse and like driving cattle and stuff. Like, I don't really.
No, I think it still happens somewhat, out west. Because I remember, our cousins used to talk about going on cattle drives.
They did, but even that was like 20 years ago now,
Yeah, but I think up in Wyoming and Montana and stuff, they still herd their cattle. I don't know how far, but I think there's still a small need because, the cattle always have to go to higher pastures in the summer to graze, and then in the winter they need to go down lower so they don't freeze, and they eat the hay that was cut summer, and it's in bales.
So they're really cattle relocators is what they are. That's like the prime job of a cowboy, is to relocate cattle.
Right, but I think there's always going to be, well, not always. I mean, I guess some people keep them in the same place all year around, but I know we did that, or people around Woodruff, where we grew up, did that, and so I think there'll always be some type of need for it. And
yeah, well, a lot of it has to do with the terrain. Like, the terrain is just, it doesn't really make sense for a car or a truck, I guess, and you really need it. I guess what it comes down to is a horse, really. Like, a horse is able to be adaptable enough to get over a lot of terrain, and like nimble enough to change directions quickly, and to like, you can't really do that in a vehicle, maybe like a four-wheeler, but I don't know. I think a horse is probably the best.
Yeah, I think a horse is the best. Yeah, so they'll always have a need for those quadrupeds.
Yeah.
But
you were talking about Portlandia a while back, and I did watch that Office Hours with Fred Armisen. It was pretty funny. I think I told you that. The one thing about Tim is he captures like the general feel of Bill Maher. I don't know if he's necessarily trying to do an impression of him, but I wish he would like try to hone his impressions a little bit more, because it's not really an impression per se, would you say?
Yeah, that's right. And I've been listening to Fly on the Wall a lot, because it's one thing I haven't listened to that much, and they talk about how, when you, like, Dana Carvey is one of the hosts, so
yeah,
he would always try to put a uniqueness on it that wasn't as apparent, to kind of make it his own, so it wasn't actually 100% accurate impression. He would kind of like embellish little things he didn't actually say, just to kind of make it more his.
Yeah, and so, I mean, in reality, like, for example, you think of George Bush, and he had that thing where he did this. That was part of Dana Carvey's impression, that laugh. And you didn't really see that much of that in reality with George Bush. Like, you didn't hear him doing a lot of you know what I'm saying? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. But it's still good to get really close to what they do. And another person I've been watching, I always forget his name. It's like a talent. It's like Joe DiMaggio or something, DiMarchio, and he does this Trump impersonation. It's just so freaking funny.
Oh, yeah.
And I've been watching it for a few years. I first saw him on Pauly Shore's Random Rants that he doesn't do anymore. But I think that inspired Bill Maher's Club Random. I really do. I think Pauly Shore. But anyways, yeah, it's really good to see. It's fun. It is funny when they pick up on these mannerisms that you couldn't really state. Like Trump will repeat things 2 times a lot. Like, yeah, this guy does that too, and man, it's just so funny to watch. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that the key to a good impression, because now AI is getting to the point where, as far as the actual tone of voice is concerned, they can pretty much nail it, or they're pretty darn close at this point. But it makes me realize that a big part of a good impression has to do with capturing who it is that a person is and kind of how they think. So if you're able to put that essence into your impression is what makes the impression good, not necessarily just emulating, because it's part of it, like just capturing their tone of voice and stuff. But what you really want to do to have a great impression is to capture who that person is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and it's hard to do.
Yeah, it definitely is.
I do little impersonations. It seems like the older I get, the worse I get at it, or maybe I was always terrible, but...
I remember you had a pretty good Billy Bob Thornton impression.
No, you did.
No. I did the Sling Blade thing, but everybody does that, you know?
No. That's the one. Billy Bob. I've never done Billy Bob Thornton. You always did.
Yeah, you did. I'm absolutely sure that you did a Billy Bob Thornton, like the way that he actually talks impression.
Huh.
Yeah, I guarantee that you did that, and I was pretty darn impressed. And that's not really one that people do a lot of. I mean, like I say, a lot of people do the pretty good, I reckon, but nobody does like his actual, or very few people do an impression of the way he actually talks.
He's been in a lot of movies. I appreciate a good Western, speaking of country music and cowboys. I think Tombstone is a pretty good one. It holds up, I'm trying to think of the Lonesome Dove. That's really good one. But anyway, Billy Bob Thornton is in that one too, and he plays this kind of bully bad guy that's hanging out in this saloon and always hassling everybody else and stuff, so nobody will come in there.
Yeah. And
then Wyatt Earp, who played by Kurt Russell, comes in and has basically and totally embarrasses him and everything. And but he everybody in that movie is believable to me. There's no. It just seems like everybody's cast correctly. You got Kurt Russell playing Wyatt Earp and Val Kilmer playing Doc Holliday, and just Val Kilmer is so funny in that movie. He just has these little lines where there's like, Tombstone? Have you seen that recently?
Well, your description of Billy Bob and like the other cowboy coming in and humiliating him, that does ring a bell, but all of those westerns just kind of blend together in my mind a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, mine too. But like that part where one of the bad guys is called Ringo, the second like in command bad guy. He's like looking for a fight, somebody to take him on. And by the way, before I forget, the bad guys in that movie, they say were the first cowboys, and cowboys were the first organized crime. I think they said in the whole United States, but at least in the West.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think the whole train robbery thing it's a real thing that actually happened.
Yeah, and so I never thought that cowboys were criminals like that, like thieves and stuff, but they were, according to this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they weren't just like cattle herders, but they would steal cattle from other ranchers and stuff.
Yeah, I guess I just thought of them more as not necessarily being outlaws, but just the idea of like the Wild West, as it's called, and having the opportunity, like that they were just opportunists. They went to this place where, there it was pretty much, it was unsettled, and there was really no civilization per se, and you could pretty much do whatever you wanted. So, like, a lot of what they did was just outlaw stuff, but it was more just because they could, because there wasn't really any boundaries. But
yeah,
yeah. Like, are you an outlaw if there really is no law per se? I mean, I guess there was a law. I guess you always hear about sheriffs and stuff. That every town had a sheriff.
Yeah, and then in certain towns, well, it's just it's too hard to enforce the law. But I don't know. I like a good movie that tries to get the history right with all those guys like Butch Cassidy and Billy the Kid and like so I don't know. I watched that 1883. It was really good. I didn't get as into Yellowstone as everybody else did, but I appreciate it because it shows all those beautiful parts up there by Yellowstone.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see. But the 1883, the Yellowstone origin story, that's really good. Billy Bob's in that too.
Huh.
Plays a bad guy. Wait. Well, Sam Houston's in there for sure. And it's really good. It's really good. It's really believable. And I just like I like any show that attempts to get the history right, and
yeah,
and then because they get it right, it's just so insane that those things happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like, and it seems like the older I get, that's one thing, like, you do get to be more like your parents and stuff, because, Dad's always liked Westerns, and I used to not like Westerns, but, I'll give them a chance, like, The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, I hadn't seen, I didn't watch the whole thing, and I finally watched the whole thing, and I think also the biggest thing about it is just a sense of seeing the West, seeing the mountains,
Yeah.
This YouTuber that I follow, he did this time-lapse drive from New York to LA, and it's sped up, but it still takes, like, on YouTube, it was like 6 hours long, I think, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But he video records the whole thing, and it's really interesting to see how the U.S. changes, because I've done that drive before, but I've never recorded it.
Mm-hmm.
And like the whole eastern side of the United States, it's like all dense forests,
Yeah.
like deciduous trees usually. The farther north you go, the more pines, I think. The farther south, the more, deciduous or broadleaf.
Yeah.
But, he goes on like I-80 through Pennsylvania, and it's just, there's hills and stuff, but you can't see anything because the trees are just so thick, and it lasts forever. And then it's basically that way through Ohio and Indiana. But then as he's going, you start to notice starts like spreading out a little bit more, and the trees aren't as tall and like as dense. And then when you get to like the plain states, it's all grass, like Kansas. It's just there's hardly any trees. It's just all grass.
Yeah.
And even eastern Colorado, you know, it's all flat and just, you know, it's it's just interesting, the geography. So he keeps going, gets to Denver, hangs out there, and then he does a drive on I-70 because he's trying to get to LA, but he gets off I-70 and goes down through Moab.
Yeah.
And he takes the road less traveled that is more direct if you're coming from Denver, but it's really windy and stuff because it follows the Colorado, and it's slower than 191. But it's just so cool to see that video because I've done that drive so many times, you know, and to see the Red Canyon and all the different parts of it and everything.
Yeah.
And that's why I like Westerns, is because I get to see that part of the, you know, where you are, because I don't, you know, I really would like to be able to get out in it more, you know, and miss it and stuff. So that's a kind of next best thing. That and like just looking at pictures that I took from previous summers. But man, it's not really the same. I miss being out there, you know. So it'll be cool to go down to Albuquerque for, you know, just drive safe and.
Yeah, I'm trying to have a positive outlook about the whole thing. I mean, it's kind of lucky that the checkout for this Airbnb that I'm in right now kind of coincides with her last day, which was Friday. So I had to extend it like 3 or 4 days, but yeah, I'm thinking that actually what I'm gonna do is if they say that I need to stay for another week, I'm just gonna ask them if I can pay for the hotels myself, you know, because I'd really much rather do that than drive all the way back, and then quite likely then have to make that trip out there again the following Monday. So, but yeah, it is interesting just seeing the different geography, and one of the really interesting things is just hearing the transition from these regional accents, you know, because it's not usually that abrupt. Like you can actually hear slight variations in neighboring towns to where eventually it morphs into something completely different. You know, like you think of the Wyoming / northern Utah accent, at least rural, like we've impersonated them a lot, you know, that whole, yeah, I gotta go out there and take care of the cows. And there's a whole mentality around it to where if you get into Nebraska, you start to hear a little bit more of that, oh yeah, sure, you know, not quite that distinct of a Midwest accent, but it starts to get Midwest-ish. There's like a spectrum of accents. It's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like the rainbow where you get the
and I think the geography influences the accents, you know.
I think so. Yeah.
I mean, geography. Can't really say exactly how.
Well, like I think we've talked about this. That even on the West Coast, like California, it's totally makes sense that surfers would talk in this big, almost like a big way of talking. You know what I mean? And it kind of makes sense that. Oh yeah, sure, you'd have this real pragmatic way of talking in the Midwest. You know, because it's all about like pragmatism and stuff out there, and just like really uninspiring, at least to me, pretty uninspiring, very flat lands, kind of featureless, and really extremely cold winters. It makes sense that would like make for very pragmatic people. But I think too that in the Midwest there is there's residual Swedish accent in there. Like if you think of the way Swedish people talk, like I always think of the Swedish chef, like Jordy Bork 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 Bork. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the way Midwestern people talk.
Yeah, and a lot of those Scandinavians, Mom told us that's where they settled. Wisconsin, Minnesota.
Yeah.
So totally, the Germans too. It totally makes sense.
Well, and of course on the East Coast, the most obvious one is probably just the way. Well, come over here. Does that really sound Italian to you? Because Italians are like this, So I'm not really sure how it went from that to get over here. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely the new continent morphing of the language. But there's Italians that were, if you're trying to do the gangster accent, there were Italians, mostly Italians, but there were also Irish, and I guess they kind of had to morph those two languages into...
When you think about it, like when they're like, "Hey, mama, come on, mama," you can kind of see where it turns into, "Get over here." It kind of does sound Italian in that way.
Yeah.
I'm trying to fuse the two together. Anyway, well, I'm kind of curious I had this whole conversation. I've had a little bit of anxiety, wondering if this has even been recording. So, and I think it's kind of affected my the way I'm acting. But
and I know that the video affects the way I act too. But this is a good. I'm glad we're at least trying. You're at least trying. I guess you're trying it.
No, we're trying it. But I'm just hopefully something gets recorded, because it's also nice to know that I've also noticed that just while we've been talking, I've kind of settled down a little bit and
me too.
A bit more myself.
I'm trying to think what else we usually talk about that we should try to get in here, but I think it's a pretty good sampling of what we usually talk about. We hit some music, we talked about language, culture. We pretty much
it's stuff we talk about. It is harder. I think that it would actually become more quality if we got used to being on camera. But I mean, it's obviously just if we've settled down just during one conversation, we would get used to it. We'd forget that the camera's even going. But anyway, I'll see I'll hit stop recording and see how shitty it is. Hopefully it's not totally shitty. Hopefully we got something, but I'll let you know.
So when did you say you're going to New Mexico again? Next week?
Monday. Monday.
So you already rented a car, or you still have to rent a car, or?
Yeah, I've rented a car and booked a hotel. My company actually has this on their hub, or whatever you call it, their kind of central place for employees to access employer resources. There's actually this tile that you can click on where you book your travel, like your rental car, your flight, your hotel.
Through the company?
Yeah. I'm sure it's hooked up with somehow connected with these major these major corporations and airlines and stuff. But we get a better deal. We partner with certain airlines and hotels and stuff to get us a better deal. But
nice.
Yeah, I booked that a couple weeks ago or something like that. So
cool.
I'll be
so
going.
You got that taken care of.
Yeah, we'll see. But
now, what about when you get back to Denver or Colorado Springs? Did you book an Airbnb for that, or?
Yeah, well, I'm just kind of playing that by ear. I think that first of all, I need to find out
how long
when
you're
I'm
going to be in.
back. But yeah, I don't know why they would have a problem with me just saying, I'll pay for it out of pocket, and I'll pay for any extra cost for the rental car. But I would much rather just stay up here. I mean, to me, I don't know that they could argue that, you know, because that's my life at that point. Like, they can't tell me that I can't rent or can't book a hotel up there on my own dime. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But,
Well, yeah, that, I guess just look at it like an adventure and
yeah.
maybe see the shiprock down there. That's a really cool thing. If you get, it's around the Four Corners area. Shiprock, yeah, it's really cool. You can see it from 50 miles away in every direction.
That's
and
cool.
then you just see as you're driving get closer and closer. It's such a cool place, and I guess you can't really technically go up to it because it's on Navajo land, but I did, and because it's like this volcanic little, you know, it's weird to even call it a mountain. It's not really. It's really like a cone of a volcano, and then it's got like two ridges coming out, kind of 90 degrees angle from each other, kind of like arms, and it's something else, man. They're really like these, what is it, volcanic walls. Yeah, it's really just.
So it is actually a volcano?
Yeah, it's a, I guess, petrified volcano. But yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, I've seen pictures and it looks really pretty. Kind of, it's like a more arid version of Colorado or something.
Yeah, totally.
But I haven't heard great stuff about Albuquerque, to be honest with you. Like, most people say it's like a lot of, like, there's a real big drug problem down there, I guess.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, that's what I heard too. But there's a lot of good art down there too. There's a lot of, like, I remember
heard that.
A lot of people, like, I don't know if there's like different building codes in New Mexico, but they just build their own structures.
Yeah.
You know, non-traditional building materials, and it's just really pretty striking. And yeah, so that'll be fun. And, you know, of course, you'll drive careful down there.